Is it possible to develop integrity like you develop a muscle? The stronger the muscle gets, the more complex and nuanced situations you will be able to handle as a person or a leader of integrity. Integrity then lies in the everyday decisions that you make, and these decisions accumulate over time to define your destiny. That's the subject of this week's video in part 2 of the Integrity series. In my last video, we talked about 3 stages in developing one's philosophical and spiritual foundations of integrity. The first deals with humility. Can we embody the humility of Socrates when he says, "All I know is that I know nothing"? When we acknowledge that human wisdom is limited and that divine wisdom, the source of all that is good and beautiful and virtuous, is limitless, then we become receptive to the higher ideals and are better able to reflect them when the moment calls for it. The pursuit of fame, power, status, and wealth are means and ends that don't really do much for the soul. When pursued single-mindedly, they have a muddying influence on our psyche and corrupt our actions. One can easily lose one's compass and compromise one's ethics if these virtues are prized above the virtues of the soul. This was Socrates' warning to his fellow Athenians, for which he was put to death. Second, in pursuing the knowledge of the good or the divine through contemplation of the soul, we are better able to discern the qualities of justice, beauty, harmony, and virtue, and thereby express them more easily in our habits. In this video, we'll pick up on the third stage of the development of integrity, which is this: integrity is a choice. Integrity is a result of a series of choices. These choices help build the foundations of our character. As the 6th century BC philosopher Heraclitus wrote, "Character is destiny." Around the same time around the world, on a completely different side of the world in China, the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, author of the Tao Te Ching, is attributed to have said something similar, although it's more likely that this quote is a modern paraphrasing of his ideas. It goes like this: "Watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. And watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny." While separated by thousands of miles and 2 centuries, Lao Tzu and Plato student Aristotle would likely agree on the following: life may seem unpredictable at times, and it will likely present us with some challenging scenarios. And in these scenarios, we will have the opportunity to choose how we get to respond. Each choice we make then is either a solid brick or a bag of air that we add to the foundations of our character. Integrity then is built upon the solid bricks of truth, justice, beauty, harmony, and the unchanging divine principles that govern this physical reality. It is a function of consciously making virtuous choices and decisions over an accumulated period of circumstances, situations, and experiences. It gets to be practiced and perfected over time, from small decisions to the big ones. It's a decision that gets to be strengthened and ready for those moments in life when principles of justice and virtue are at stake, or situations that require our unwavering courage to uphold moral principles. Without this strong foundation, we stand the potential of folding under the pressure of social influence, culture, false sense of responsibility, or blackmail in its many forms. How do we develop this muscle? I'll present 3 practical methods in this video. Aristotle presents us with an ethical framework that has come to be known as the golden mean. The golden mean allows us to choose an action that is most likely to yield the optimal outcome in situations that we encounter or in moral dilemmas. It has its ideological origins in Socrates, who regarded moderation as one of the big 3 virtues alongside wisdom and courage. Aristotle also took this one step further. To act in a virtuous manner means to choose an action that lies in the middle of 2 extremes: deficiency and excess, which Aristotle characterized both as vices. We can see this presented in this following chart. So here's an example to illustrate the point. Aristotle characterizes courage as the virtuous response to danger. Rashness or foolishness, which would have one dive into the thick of danger without much thought, he would consider this to be an excessive response. And on the other hand, we have cowardice, which would have one run the opposite direction due to fear. This would be an example of a deficient extreme. Courage then is the golden mean because it appreciates the danger of the moment and takes constructive and intelligent action to confront the danger. Another example is that of managing money. The excessive extreme is greed, hoarding, overspending, while the deficient extreme is miserliness, scarcity thinking, or tight-fistedness. The right balance then is liberality with money, spending on one's needs, while also being able to give generously. Practically speaking, if we are an ethical conundrum, we can think of the extreme responses to the situation on the excessive and the deficient ends, and then choose the option that most aligns with our sense of right in the middle. Here are some examples of how the golden mean can be applied. One's search for the golden mean, according to Aristotle, is a search for the just course, and one's ability to discern the wise and appropriate course of action and apply it he called phronesis. One of the main criticisms of Aristotle's framework is that it's highly subjective. There are many situations where it can be challenging to discern what the golden mean or response should be. So let's do this as a thought exercise. Let's say you come to know of some unethical activity taking place in your workplace by someone who is in a leadership position. So to say something might compromise your own job. What is the excessive extreme in this situation, and what is the deficient extreme? You might say that to barge in and attempt to correct the wrong yourself might be an excessive extreme, as would sending out an all-company email alert, right? Alerting to the fact of what's going on. Might be a little excessive for the moment. The deficient extreme might be to pretend you didn't see or hear anything and go about your own business. In other words, don't do anything out of fear. What would the golden mean be in this situation? You could alert the issue to HR, avoiding the need to personally involve yourself on the record. You could also speak to another trusted member of the leadership team, who you know is not likely to be involved in the situation, and therefore they can offer you guidance on next steps. Or they might even be able to take action with their added authority. Whatever the response, it seems highly subjective, right? And it's going to require some careful discernment on your part. Aristotle would say in this instance that the more you practice the art of just decision-making, the clearer your choices and more just your responses will be. In other words, the more developed your character, the more nuanced your discerning or your phronesis will be. In an increasingly polarized world, a world in which the extremes appear to be glorified, the path of virtuous action, according to Socrates and Aristotle, lies in the middle way between the extremes. But what if, in some instances, a more radical stance is required? This takes us to method 2. In part 1 of the Integrity series, we brought up the examples of Jesus, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King. They would advocate a path that might seem extreme to Aristotle. For instance, would Aristotle, or you, think to place Jesus' guidance to love thy enemy or pray for your enemies as a response of moderation in the golden mean chart? Or if Aristotle saw Gandhi and his fellow unarmed compatriots getting beaten down by fully armed British soldiers in the non-violent Satyagraha movement for independence, would he call this extreme or rash perhaps to go unarmed against the might of the British Empire? Or when Martin Luther King and his fellow civil rights activists marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge towards certain and merciless beating by law enforcement, would he consider this to be rather extreme? Sometimes the principled response, the response we most need to see in response to injustice or unkindness, is not the moderate one, but the one that exhibits radical compassion. There is nothing middle way about this kind of radical compassion that is inspired by higher principles of divine truths and justice. Yet it is this principled and radical compassion that shifted the greatest of empires and changed the landscapes of freedom all around the world. Divine love has inspired radical progress in the history of our world, and so can we when matters of justice are concerned. The 20th century yogi and guru Yogananda once wrote in his book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, "Softer than a flower where kindness is concerned, stronger than thunder where principles are at stake." This is the very gentleness and at the same time, the very firmness with which we get to demonstrate our character and integrity. Now, you might be asking at this point, Samier, these are some pretty big examples. I'm not trying to lead a civil rights movement or a spiritual revolution anytime soon. My issues are far more down to earth. Can you give me some practical guidance for everyday situations where I can, practice or build this integrity you're talking about? I got you. I made a list of 8 questions that help me and my clients elevate our motives in line with integrity and principled action. So next time you encounter a sticky or challenging situation, can you ask yourself these 8 questions before you take action? Is my response one that is the most loving or compassionate that I can manage? Is my response one that is fair and will contribute to the greatest good for all involved? Is my response in alignment with my highest principles and truth? Is my response one that I can go to sleep at night with in peace? Is my response one that I will be proud of myself for, or one that my parents, grandparents, my children, significant other would be proud of me for? Is my response devoid of any ego? For example, can you check in on your motives to ensure that ego is not driving or influencing your actions in any way? Ego likes to hide behind virtue. Is my response one that represents who I am or expands me to become who I aspire to be? And finally, if you believe, does my response exemplify the words of divine love or God? If you're not answering yes to all the above, then it's time to reevaluate and elevate your motives. Elevate your motives and you'll elevate your actions. Elevate your actions and you'll elevate your character. Now we're ready to move on to the third method of developing integrity, the one that I teased in part 1 of this series when I mentioned the principle of degrees. Method 3, the principle of degrees. To conceptualize the principle of degrees, let me use an example from one of my favorite hobbies, archery, with the traditional Mongolian horsebow. There's no modern aiming device on the horsebow, which means there's a combination of technical skill and intuition involved in landing my target. The first shot I take is a measurement. I do my best to aim and shoot with as much accuracy as I can. Now, depending on where this first shot lands, I'll know where to calibrate my movements, my aim, my adjustments, so I can land the next shot on target or close to the target. This is how I become more precise over my next shots. It's a game of subtle degrees and adjustments. If you're an avid flyer, there's a related concept in the aviation world with the 1 in 60 rule, which states that for every 1 degree that a plane veers off course over the course of 60 miles, the plane is going to veer 1 nautical mile off course. For instance, let's say I get on a flight from where I'm residing right now in Bali, Indonesia, to Washington, D.C., my home city. If the plane is just 1 degree off course at its starting point, then by the time I'm supposed to arrive at Washington, D.C., I'm going to be 170 miles off course. So I'm not going to be landing in Washington, D.C. I'll likely be landing somewhere much closer to New York City with this marginal misalignment, way off target. To make this analogy work, let's call our destination the qualities of integrity we'd like to achieve. Here are 11 of them, just to give you an example. Looking at this list, what qualities of integrity are you most looking to develop or expand upon in your life? Would you add any to this list, or is there anything else that you can think of that I missed? When we know our destination, we can practice the principle of degrees, which is this. How can you demonstrate at least 1% more of the quality that you're looking to embody every day? For example, if it's courage that you're looking to increase, how can you be just 1% more courageous every day? Here's the practice. Can you list out 3 to 5 ways that you can demonstrate courage? Maybe it's speaking up at the next meeting with an idea that you've been meaning to share. Maybe it's having the courage to approach that someone you've been too shy to speak to lately. Or maybe it's having that challenging conversation with that person you've been meaning to have that challenging conversation with. Perhaps it's addressing inappropriate behavior that you've been putting up with for some time. out of fear of rocking the boat. Now, what if it's kindness or compassion that you're looking to develop? Can you demonstrate kindness in 3 to 5 specific ways, like leaving people in a happier or more joyful state just for having interacted with you at some point in the day? Or leaving your environment in a cleaner place than you found it, like picking up a piece of trash on your jog, or even wiping down the public bathroom restroom sink when you're done using it, right? It's cleaner for the next person, just 1% better. You might also leave an incredible tip for your next server that would just make their day or week or month, right? These are all ways that we can incrementally demonstrate those qualities that we're most looking to adopt into our lives. Feel free to hit pause at this point and create your own list of items that you look forward to fulfilling. As you accomplish these practical demonstrations, you strengthen your capacity to be even more courageous or kind, or whichever quality that you're working towards. Now, keep adding to your list of demonstrations until you feel you've embodied this virtue fully. Can you commit to making at least one demonstration a day, or whatever 1% more each day looks like to you? This adds up over time, and soon enough, you'll be ready to demonstrate courage and kindness in all ways, big and small. I mean, can you imagine if you did 1% every day for 100 days? That's 100% difference. And then you can move on to the next set of attributes that you'd like to focus on. If this is your time to step forward and enhance your qualities as a leader and a person of integrity, then schedule a consultation with me to discuss your goals and to see if working together is the right idea. The link is in the description, and I look forward to hearing from you. I hope this video has given you some practical approaches to start practicing and cultivating integrity in your life. Make a note to yourself that there should not be any expectation of any return or reward as you carry out these practices. You are simply doing this for the sake of doing what is right, just, and good. As you do so, you get to experience what Socrates and Plato would call eudaimonia, purposeful, flourishing, or fulfilled living. You also get to develop the art of phronesis, the ability to wisely discern the wise and just path in any situation. Your reward is the development of character and unshakable integrity. This will bring you greater peace and satisfaction within you. This in itself is priceless and among the most worthy and sought after of qualities. In part 3 of this series, I'll share 2 additional strategies to develop your character and integrity, the latter of which is the most powerful idea that I know. So stay tuned by ringing the bell and hitting the subscribe button on your way out. Until then, may peace be with you.